Welcome to the OVW Podcast, the unofficial podcast of Ohio Valley Wrestling. My name is Jack Minoks.
I'm Brian Hines.
And we are joined today by an OVW personality, this time in the form of Kharn Alexander. Kharn, how are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for joining us.
I like that name. It makes you sound like a European diplomat or something.
Oh,
Kharn,
well.
Kharn Alexander.
If only.
So we were kind of talking before we started the microphones here, and you started at OVW back in 2006.
Yes, I believe it was September 2006, if I'm correct.
So give us, in your words, what's happening at OVW in September of 2006?
Well, in September 2006, WWE was still a developmental territory or OVW was still WWE developmental territory. And I honestly, when I got there, I didn't know that. I pretty much just picked the closest wrestling school to my hometown, and I got really lucky.
So where are you from?
Hagerstown, Indiana.
Okay, right on.
The training was Tank Toland was the beginner's class trainer, and that is who I trained under probably, 10 weeks or so is usually what it was back then. And then you went up to the intermediate with Rip Rogers.
Okay.
And the contract class was Al Snow.
Right on. Okay.
So
cool.
That was kind of the hierarchy of the classes that consisted of OVW then. Now there's a million other classes outside of, the ring, but then it was just basically the three, beginners, intermediate, advanced for in-ring work.
Sure. What's something that sticks out from you from that early training?
Well, it was pretty intense. I mean, it's still intense now, but it was less structured. I remember specifically in the intermediate class, sometimes we would come in and Rip would ring the bell and be like, "All right, go." And he would just expect us to start wrestling. And we would do so for probably 2 hours straight at some times. Here now, comparatively, there's usually a structure, basically we have to have, as one of the teachers, I have to have a syllabus even for my class. So there's a lot more detail that goes into it rather than just, hey, get in the ring and wrestle.
Sure.
And I'm sure at the time, Rip had his own idea, but we were, not privy to what was going on. We were just like, he was just like, hey, do this at any given time. Now you're going to chain, now you're going to do a high spot, now you're going to do et cetera, et cetera.
And is he just like calling these out to you and you?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Especially during like the chain sessions, it would be like 2-hour chain sessions, and he would ring the bell and he'd say, grab an arm, and we'd chain an arm back and forth. And then he'd say, start heat, and we'd start heat on the arm. Then he'd ring the bell again, he'd be like, switch to a leg, and we'd just go through every single part of the body you could imagine for 2 hours straight. And then finally, we get our water break.
Golly, man. So do you would you even know who you were? Or do you just grab like the person
You just grab somebody,
closest to you?
yeah. You just like
That's amazing.
And if you took too long to it was like a big thing. If you took too long to like find somebody, he'd be like, "Well, what the heck are you doing? Like, start wrestling. Like, this is what we're not here to screw around." So, I mean, he was no nonsense.
That sounds like it. Well, he still is apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I just watched his podcast the other day. He's still Rip. So
that's, getting to learn under Rip Rogers, that's like a huge opportunity. One of the kind of the unsung minds, I guess, of training wrestling. One of the great trainers of that era, really. As you kind of move forward through wrestling, like OVW, what's the next stop after OVW?
I'm still kind of figuring that out, honestly. I mean, as far as me now, OVW, before, I never thought I'd really leave other than to, move up and continue my wrestling career.
Sure.
But in about 2014, I actually took a break from wrestling to pursue acting.
Okay, right on.
So I did that for about 10 years, and now I'm back to wrestling because, we always come back.
It's hard place to leave.
Yeah, it is. It's and everyone will tell you that that's been the wrestling business. It's hard to just get out of because you think you're out, and then you
get pulled back in.
Yep, you get that. It's kind of addicting. So
was 2014 when had you already gone to school for acting? Because I know you have a master's.
So yeah, I have a master's, an MFA in theater performance, and a BFA in acting specifically. Actually, how that occurred was I had been to WWE a select amount of times as an extra and for tryouts and stuff, and they pretty much liked everything about me except for my mic skills.
Okay.
And a couple of my mentors on the indie scene also had, expressed this to me. They're like, you need to take some acting classes. That's the one weak spot you got.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just, I didn't know, like workshops or anything around the area. So I just started enrolling in colleges and being like, okay, I'll just try to do, a program,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up kind of getting sucked into it at Ball State University. And they're a BFA program,
Okay.
which is a 4-year consecutive. Like you have to be there for 4 years. It's not like a quick like associate's degree type
Mm-hmm.
thing. It basically builds on itself. So I kind of had to make the decision because I was having a lot of fun doing that and playing different characters other than the Kharn Alexander character that I had been playing for almost 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, maybe I'll take a break, and if sometime in the future I come back to wrestling, I come back to wrestling. If I don't, I don't. But then I did come back to wrestling, and the ultimate decision for that was because I originally went into acting to get better at my wrestling work.
Right.
So, and it's kind of, I'm at a point in life now where I'm like, it's either going to be now or never. So here we are.
What's a role that you got outside of wrestling that you really enjoyed playing?
Oh, there's so many. Something that people might be familiar with listening, Puck from Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare.
Oh, wow. Nice. Okay, right on.
For people listening that don't know Midsummer Night's Dream, it's basically has like fairies and it's very mystical. And Puck is one of the very mischievous fairies in the forest. We'll say. Yeah. And he's usually played by a very small person, or like a kid sometimes, or even a girl at points.
Right.
And I got the role I didn't really ask for an audition because in college we'll go in, we'll audition for the whole season, and we'll get given our roles.
Right.
I had to talk to the director because this was a dream role of mine, and I never thought I'd get it because of my stature, basically.
Because you're not a small guy.
No, I'm not.
You're not
at
getting
all.
mistaken for a little kid or anything.
So I just was like, what? I'll take a risk. I'll just throw it out there and see what he thinks, because this director has been known to make some interesting choices. I've worked for him before, and he's like, well, I'm really really interested in you wanting to play Puck. So why don't I just give you a call back regardless, and we'll see what happens. And he gave me a call back for Puck, and he gave me a call back for a couple other characters, and I ended up getting the role. The interesting thing was this was during COVID.
Oh.
And a lot of productions were being broadcast on Zoom. You just sit in front of a camera, and they basically maybe put a backdrop or something, or like a virtual like castle scene or something like that, if it's like a fantasy type script or whatnot, which Midsummer Night's Dream is. What we did, we had empty theaters, obviously, because no one was able to come out to see shows. So we built individual boxes and green screened them. So we found this program that we would take the actors in the green screen box and impose them on a scene, and it would look like both of us were talking to each other.
Oh, that's so dope.
But in reality, I was like acting to a blank wall.
A wall, yeah.
Oh, wow. So when we have to memorize, where we're going on stage, it was like an extra step because we couldn't reference really where the stage was.
Yeah, you had no way to block yourself.
Our partner, like as far as our scene partner, we had to really, really make sure we knew where we were looking as well as where we were walking. And the only thing we had for reference was a small like computer screen like off in the corner that we could kind of look, but we couldn't just like look right at it and look back, because then that breaks the fourth wall and it's just doesn't suit the story. So it was a lot of memorization like that wise, as well as the lines, as well as anything else that we had to go about. But it was a really interesting process, and it was a good learning curve, but really challenging as well.
Yeah, that is a very unique set of circumstances.
Yeah,
that is incredibly challenging. I can't help but feel like though maybe it kind of being put with your back against the wall, being put in this unique set of circumstances. Walking into wrestling has got to feel easy after that, right? Walking back into wrestling.
To a degree, I mean, to a degree, yeah. I always talk to people because people are always like, oh, well, what's the difference between wrestling and acting and this and that? And I'm like, well, it's interesting because I've done film and theater, and wrestling is kind of like this happy mesh of both of them, because you have to in the ring still kind of consider where the camera is. Like we have the hard cam, and then we have like, the camera people around the ring, and still like play towards that. But then you also have the audience that you have to assess as well.
Yeah, you're really paying to two masters.
So there's different rules for that. Like when you act for a lens, it's like very like kind of I'm going to use the word condensed. Like all your energy, usually when you're in a film or something, it's very, very condensed and very, I guess, intense. But when you're acting for an audience, you want it to be big and open and extravagant, which you don't usually want that for a lens, because then it comes off as not genuine.
Right.
So wrestling is an interesting balance between that. And you kind of lean towards being the big and extravagant and having, huge choices, because it's kind of like the genre forgives it.
Right.
But you still don't want to make it difficult for your cameramen and your editors and all that, because then it just causes a whole nother set of problems if you do too much, I guess.
Well, it's that old that thing that we've heard many times on here, is that every single part of the process depends on the other part of the process.
Oh yeah.
You guys are all a team, not just in the ring, but behind the scenes, et cetera, et cetera. Do you mind to tell me kind of, I guess, what your title is and what your role is at OVW right now?
So right now I am teaching the on-camera presentation class. Essentially what I really wanted to do when I came back to wrestling was take a lot of the stuff I learned in acting, specifically theater, like different techniques and tools, and implement them in wrestling character work and promos. Because almost every day I went into class, I was like, man, I wish I knew that in wrestling. Like for like 10 years straight.
What's one of those things? What would one of those things be?
If there's one thing I would give to like just people listening out there that are struggling with promoter thing, would be to speak on action. And what I mean by that is to have an intention in mind. So if I'm saying, let's just use a generic, like, hey, bring it on, like what are like
Yeah.
So you can just say, like, that's our line. Hey, bring it on to your opponent or whoever you're doing a promo in the room. But you have to have something behind that, a subtext maybe. So this could be something like to provoke or to threaten or to encourage, any sort of verbiage. So you don't want it to be flat. You don't want it to just be saying your lines. That's what I mean when I tell my students to speak on action or to use an action verb. And if they don't know what it is, because I'll often ask them, I'll be like, so what's your action verb? And they won't know. And I'll be like, I know you don't know because you didn't choose one.
Because there's not one. That's some great insight. That's some really great insight. I think a lot of people in general could learn to speak with action. How are you enjoying your time back at OVW so far?
I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I mean, it's very different because I'm in a different role and I'm working my way into the ring. I've done a few dark matches here and there, but I am still in a place where I'm trying to like catch up physically in that type of work.
Sure.
I did a lot of stage combat and that kind of stuff in theater, but it's a very different animal. I also worked stunts, and that's another different animal. Like it's like they all have like crossover, but they're all very different, have their own set of rules, stage combat, stunts, and professional wrestling.
So is that like stunts on stage or stunts on film?
Stunts on film.
Okay, right
So
on.
so stage combat is generally like the fighting and the falling and that, and then stunts is the same, but just for the camera.
Did you have to go through like when we were talking to Island Girl TT? Did you go through the big stunt classes and everything where people get lit on fire and stuff? Or?
So I never. So I had classes. When I was in Kansas City for a short period of time, I worked for a company called Ronin Stunt Company, who's doing a lot of different projects right now. I've been keeping up with them. They're all really good friends of mine. I never got lit on fire there, but I did get it lit on fire for a short film one time, and it was when I was very early acting, and I have been reprimanded for doing that ever since by pretty much any professional I see, because there was no professional like stunt coordinator on set,
right?
And want to have a stunt coordinator on set for any sort of combat or weapon handling or anything like that, because even in big productions, like $1 million productions, something can go wrong if you don't.
We saw it recently.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. But this was a situation where I was right by a pool, and it was a short film comedy, and it was called Pool Party, and we were basically gangsters kidnapping this boss's son and interrogating him and stuff. and we were at his house just outside by his pool and had him tied up. And I, just happenstance, like a gasoline can gets knocked over, and I do a close-up of it, and it, spills out, and then someone lights a cigarette, and happenstance, I just flick it, and it happens to go on the gasoline, and it trails over to my leg and goes up my leg, and 10 seconds later, I notice it after the fact, and then just jump right in the pool.
That answers my question. Sorry, Brian.
I was just going to add that I too have been on fire, but it wasn't stunt related, and I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, so it was interesting because they put they got a pair of like dress pants, and they got them all like completely wet and like with cold water, and I put those on and put another pair of pants on over it, so that if the fire went through, it would like kind of fizzle out. But then they put certain adhesive where they wanted the fire trail to go on my leg, so it would only go there, hopefully, and it did. But the safe, the fail safe we had was I was right by a pool. I was supposed to jump into it anyway. That was like the end of that scene was like, oh, I'm on fire. And the joke is that my character can't swim. So I jump in the pool, and then I start drowning, and my boss who is there like trying to be the straight man, and the interrogator has to jump in and save me because our other person wouldn't do it and refused to do it because they had a new suit on.
Oh, that's great.
Anyone wants to watch this, it's a very short film. It's on YouTube. It is called Pool Party.
Okay, Pool Party. We'll see if we can find a link to it. We'll see if we can find a link to it and facilitate that. That kind of answered my question because I was like, oh, I think that they probably set this boy on fire and then just had a bucket. And that's kind of basically what it was, a huge bucket. That's amazing. Brian Hines?
So as far as your day-to-day job at OVW these days, what is the most challenging aspect of it, and what is the most rewarding for you?
Great question.
So the most challenging is really getting people to just be comfortable. I've really, every student I've had, there's a level of uncomfortability just talking in front of anyone.
Sure.
One of my teachers, I think it was actually a public speaking teacher, it wasn't one of my acting teachers, he told me that the number one fear in the world is public speaking.
Yeah.
More so than death.
Mine's actually drowning or getting caught on fire. So,
but like it's funny because people would rather die than speak in public.
Yeah,
more people would rather die than speak in public. So I always took that with, and I share that with my students. I'm like, you guys are already making an attempt, so you're already ahead of the game.
Yeah,
you're here in this class. You didn't, say no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to give up. That's not the part of wrestling I want to do. Because I also tell them day one, I'm like, if you want to be successful in this industry now, you have to be able to talk as well as wrestle.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very few times do people have a character now they go out there and they just wrestle and they never say anything. Those days are kind of over. Like a lot of promotions are based on character, not really skill as far as just in-ring work.
Yeah.
You kind of got to have the total package now because that's part of entertainment.
Right.
And a lot of the entertainment comes from, we see it in WWE and, any other promotions. We see it in OVW all the time too. A lot of the entertainment comes just by being on the mic.
Yeah.
And we create those situations by speaking to each other and talking to each other, and whether you want to call it doing a scene or a segment or a promo or whatever, that builds to the action.
And especially at OVW, people, that audience is so willing and so ready to make an emotional connection.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just you got to give yourself the opportunity to get out there and show them who you are.
But the second part of that question, the most rewarding, is probably when I see my students have that breakthrough. And for the first time, they, get up there and they just let it all go and they just, take a risk and they do it. That's one of the things we always mention in acting is like, you got to take a risk. Mm-hmm. You have to have high stakes. The higher the stakes, the more interesting it's going to be, the more compelling the scene is going to be. And you don't want to try to be interesting. You just want to live in those circumstances. So if professional wrestling is the circumstances, some situation is going to be, we're going to fight somebody. So really believe that you're about to fight somebody.
Yeah, sure.
And you're saying these words for a reason, whether it's to get a title shot or, somebody took your title or, you have a rival or what have you. But there was one time, I won't name my student, but he was very, very much like he would get up there and he would freeze. He would freeze over and over again. Then we would do some exercises where I would go up there with him and, stand with him and be the interviewer. And I would, interview him and say, okay, ask questions. He'd answer. And then I'd step away and I'd be like, all right, say everything you just said, but without me asking the questions. And he would be able to do it, but then like he would go back to like being too scared the next week. And then, and it wasn't really scared. It was just like a nerves thing.
Sure.
That
Timid.
This wasn't a skill that he had. And then one day, I don't remember what exercise we were doing, but it was just some scenario that I guess I gave him that just happened to be like, okay, I'm just going to go for it today. And I was like, wow, I have no notes for you. That was an amazing promo. Good job.
And
like that's like you can, and so, but from then on, I was like, now I know you can do it.
Yeah. Now you've raised the bar on yourself.
Your goose is cooked. You're in there now.
Whenever you kind of see people kind of reverting or falling back into old habits after they've had a breakthrough, like what do you do to get them back on course?
I just point it out as soon as they start doing it. Like some of the biggest habits are stepping with your feet. They'll just people step back and forth, or they'll sway back and forth, or they'll start pacing or walking randomly. And I always tell them like there's a time and a place for that if it's a choice. But then I ask them, like, do you know you're doing that? And they're like, no, I didn't know I was doing that. I'm like, because you're nervous.
Yeah.
So now you got to have in the back of your head to not do that until you get used to not doing it. So whenever like they'll get out of it, but then we'll try some new exercise or something. They'll start coming back again. And in the middle of it, I'll be like, stop stepping, stop swaying, stop doing whatever nervous tick that you have, holding your, grabbing your pants or whatever, adjusting your shirt. Because there are times for that to be used in character. Like if we're, more of like maybe a proper businessman as a character, we're going to, adjust our shirt. But if we're, just adjusting it because we're trying to figure out what to say next, then it's clear. It's clear when it's a choice and it's part of your character, and it's clear when it's something that is like, I'm doing this because I, am lost or confused, or I'm nervous about what to say.
You just don't know what to do with your hands or something.
Yeah.
And I'm sure for a lot of these guys and gals that they never thought that they were going to be in an acting class or have to do acting, or, they weren't on stage in high school, or, maybe they weren't on stage since a little kid's pageant at church when they were 6,
Right.
So,
and I when I started, I was one of them.
Yeah.
I wanted to just be in the ring and wrestle because I wrestled in high school, and I like wrestling. I know this is different, but I want to, keep going with it. I had no intention of getting on a mic and talking. I'm like, I don't need to do that. I'll be good enough that I just, don't have to. And then I got into Rip's class, and Rip was like, promos. I'm like, what's a promo? And I was one of those guys that froze up over and over again. And because I originally started with a very like gothic character, like, because I really like Kane and the Undertaker growing up.
Well, yeah.
And was like, those characters don't really speak. So how do I go about this? And it, kind of had to evolve into something that was a little less of this like creature and more of this wrestler with more of a gothic style. But I was definitely one of those people that was like, I wanted nothing to do with being on the mic. And then now I teach the class.
I think we've heard a similar story so many times during these interviews where a younger version of someone's self says, no, I don't have to do this part because I don't really want to do this part. And every single time they get shown either, through a teacher or just the process of wrestling, like, oh, I should have been listening. I should have been listening. These people actually do know what they're talking about. Yeah. Did you go through a similar kind of?
I mean, yeah, I still attempted promos every class that we did them. But I still had in the back of my head, as long as I look good and I wrestle well, at least I got 2 of the 3, I can make it.
Right.
And I'll never forget my first WWE like extra spot tryout. I did really well with my in-ring work because we do a match and then we do a promo. And they're like, all right, we're going to go to the promo booth. And I'm like, okay, I have something prepared and everything, and I'm, just going to do it. And it's going to be what it is. And I was pretty pleased with it. And then they gave me something different to do. They said, hey, here's your scenario.
Okay.
Go. And I was completely caught off guard. I had no improv skills at that point in time at all. And it was William Regal who was leading the promos.
Oh, that's not intimidating.
That day. And I completely bombed it. And the first thing he said to me is like, well, I'm really disappointed.
Gosh.
And that just like
that's rough,
killed
dude.
me that day. And I was just like so upset. And he's like, look, this is what you need to work on. He was one of the people who's like, take some acting classes. And I immediately researched acting classes and started trying to figure out how to get better at that. And that was the moment where I was like, I really should have just been listening to that part of my teaching or that part of my, instruction.
Right.
And really focused on it just as much as, I should have been working on promos every day, just like going to the gym every day. But then I got called back, 6 or 7 more times, and it eventually got to the point where they're like, wow, you got really good. We'll call you if we have a spot. And they never called me. So
hey, you got there, man.
Yeah, we'll see. You never know.
You got everybody that starts wrestling wants to get at least in the promo booth. You got there, man.
Yeah, I got to that point.
That's awesome. Any other stories that stick out from maybe your interactions with WWE?
So there's a couple. There's just a really funny one that so when we get there, we're told not to talk to talent at all. They're like, don't talk to talent. They have too much going on. Don't waste your time. Like that, you're gonna get in trouble if that happens. So me and my friend were, just walking down the hall. We were going, I think, to catering or something, because they always, you're allowed to go to catering and do that. You just can't talk to people. And we're walking down the hall, and out of nowhere, from one of the side doors, CM Punk just starts walking beside us.
Oh, that guy.
We're walking for probably a good 30 to 60 seconds in silence, just in a straight line, just walking with CM Punk. And finally, he leans over. He's like, "Hey guys, I'm Punk," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then we talk to him because he talked to us. So I'm sure he knows the deal. We're not allowed to say anything until they say something to us. But it was just this really awkward happenstance of him literally just walking out at the exact right time we were walking by, and just walking down the hall in a horizontal line with CM Punk.
Yeah, there's nothing more awkward than like that. A hallway, being trapped in a hallway with someone. There's
maybe
an
elevator.
That was probably my second or third time there. But then I started noticing the more I did stuff like that, talk to people or interacted with people or went places I wasn't supposed to go, the less severe it was. So there was one time one of my friends that I was with at this particular extra spot, he just it's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go get some heat." And I'm like, "All right, I'm gonna come with you." And we just went around and just explored, and we didn't really interrupt anybody or anything, but I mean, we weren't shy about saying hi to people walking down the hall and stuff. So it ended up being a thing of is that really a rule, or is it just a thing to say to people that probably would just be more of fans going in there and to keep them away from kind of wasting the time of, because I mean they do have a lot going on even before the show, pre-tapes and stuff like that, but it ended up not being as big of a deal as it seemed to be made out to be by the end of it, since I had been there so many times and just got more comfortable with the atmosphere. It was because they wanted us to stay in a specific area just watching the show, and we weren't allowed to leave that area other than going to catering and then going back. And it was I did that the first couple times I was there. Then after that, I was with one of my friends, we just kind of let's see what happens if we kind of just go elsewhere for a moment. And we never got in trouble for anything majorly at all. We never really got talked to by anybody. Now that I think about it, they just were oh. Sometimes we're "Hey, who are you guys?" We're "Oh, we're the extras." We're "Oh, okay, cool." And then whoever it was would just go on with their day. And I'm all right, well. So, I mean, yeah, there's just a lot of those things, a lot of weird little rules that, you don't really know if they're actually real or not, but they're just there for who knows why.
Those kind of same rules also exist in the theater to a little,
absolutely.
to a certain extent.
Don't touch, the, what would you call it? The soundboard or anything like that if you're an actor.
Yeah.
Which I did one time. Well, it was a light board, actually. It was during a production of one of the shows of my master's program, and there was this random switch on the wall by the light board, and it just said, it was on and off, and it said, there's a sticker beside it that said "Panic and don't panic." and I was like, this seems just like a joke. So I was I mean, I think I flipped it up to panic because I was like, I'm a little nervous today, like as a joke, just to myself.
Yeah.
And the show was going on at the time, and all the house lights just came on. Like, so all the the lights that are supposed to be out to make the like all the lights above like the audience just came on, and I heard out in the theater like there's this pause. I'm like, did that actually do something? And then they're professional actors, so they kept going with it.
Right.
And then after that, it was like kind of a inside joke about Kharn, don't touch anything that you're not supposed to be touching.
Keep your hands
like,
to yourself.
Every day, especially that show. They're like, had to remind me every day. Don't touch anything. Just stay over here.
Yeah, that's not one that they're gonna let you forget, I don't think.
No, they probably still tell that story today to like new students and stuff. Who knows? I mean, but
yeah, you made an impact.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have a new semester starting at the OVW Academy soon, or are we in progress?
It is starting soon. It's not quite yet, but
what's the first day look like at OVW of your class?
Of my class, it's really a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
So like some of the stuff I said, like I'll tell them about them having to have this skill. I talked a little bit about that, and then I talk about my background in theater. And something else I always like to let them know is that I'm not here to decide what your character is. I'm here to give you tools to develop it and make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember when I was in starting up and like trying to figure out my character, a lot of people would be like, you should do this, you should do this, you should be this kind of character, you should. And I hated it because I was like,
it's very frustrating.
I had this idea in my head, I just hadn't completely formed it yet, but everyone was like, do this completely opposite thing. You should do this other stuff or this, genre of character and get away from the goth stuff. And so I decided when I was going to teach this class, like I'm not going to do that unless someone is like, hey, I don't know what kind of character to be.
Right.
Then we can have a conversation and be like, all right, well, let me, let's talk about it. And then I'll give you suggestions down that road. But if you have not 9 times out of 10, all these students have a character in mind already that they want to do, that they're passionate about, because usually the character you originally come up with as a wrestler is kind of an extension of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
telling somebody that, hey, that's not going to work is a bit of an insult.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
a confidence killer too.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, well, I put so much thought and time into this that now you're just telling me to, I don't know, go be a frat boy or something which we have one of those characters in my last class, and he does it amazingly. But he chose to do that.
Yeah.
And he enjoys it, and it's really good. But telling like me to do that when I'm, more playing like more of a gothic character originally, it was like, that's the complete opposite of, and no one actually told me that specific thing to do,
Sure.
but that's just an example of, so I don't try to deter them from what they have already chosen.
Mm-hmm.
I try to make it better. I give them tools like the action verbs, like saying, hey, speak on action. You want action in the ring. If there's no action in the ring in your matches, it's going to be boring, right? Well, it's the same way when you speak. If you don't speak with action, you don't speak with intention, then it's going to be flat and boring.
Right. And
it's going to be the same situation. We're entertainers. We want to entertain. So I have conversations like that pretty much a lot of the day. And then I have them do a promo each just so I can see where they're at. I don't give any instruction. I just say, I want you guys to just do a promo for me. It can be about whatever you want. It can be, introduce yourself. It can be, challenging somebody in a match, or
Mm-hmm.
it can be something you've done before. It can be something completely off the cuff. I don't care. I just want to see
where you're at.
And then, I'll probably give notes a little bit after, like, say, this is what I see that you need to work on. Here's some nervous tics, this and that. And then, the second class is really where we get started, because I'll end up starting to give them homework. Like, I want an introductory promo.
Mm-hmm.
I want to really know who your character is and why you're here. And they'll come back in. They'll do their introductory promo. And then we'll do maybe exercises, like if they're having trouble getting more passionate about it, or more having that intention, I'll ask them, like, what's something that you like, that you really, other than wrestling, that you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be like, okay, cut a promo about that. And where I got that exercise was, I heard this story about Idol Stevens, when he was auditioning, or not auditioning, I say auditioning because I'm used to theater, but trying out. And in the promo room, I guess they gave him free reign. I don't know what it was, or what the parameters were, but he chose to cut a promo about baking a cake. And he put so much emotion into it and was so like invested in baking this cake. Mm-hmm. They were like, well, damn, if he can make that interesting of baking a cake, he sure as hell can, do a promo about wrestling and make it interesting.
For sure.
Yeah.
So that's where I got that. So sometimes I'll choose for them. I'll be like, I don't care, how you have to make it work, but do a promo about snowboarding, or do a promo about Halloween or Christmas, or just something completely random, just to get them more so out of their heads. Because a lot of time what I've noticed is, especially with professional wrestling, we care so much about how we present ourselves as our characters. And I'm like, for a second, we need to just forget about that, because you're latching onto it too much and you're caring about it too much to the point where it's hurting you. Mm-hmm. You're afraid of screwing up. So talk about this completely random thing that it doesn't matter if you screw up or not, because what's it matter?
Right. Yeah, transfer that mindset to something else.
And then 9 times out of 10, they let go and they actually, have more personality in it. I'm like, okay, that is actually where your wrestling promo needs to be.
Sure.
Take that energy, put it in the wrestling promo, and do the wrestling promo now. And then that's when they kind of start to get it.
So we're looking at OVWacademy.com for any potential students. I don't think that there's really any kind of age or anything that. I guess 18 on the low end, obviously, but 18 ad infinitum after that. And that's at OVWacademy.com. If there was one thing you could tell yourself in 2006 that you know now, what would it be?
Oh boy, that's a big question. One thing I could tell myself. I mean, we already talked about, really wanting to really focus more on the promos and stuff. So, I mean, that would be part of it. It would be like, hey, really listen to that part of the training as well as the rest of it, because it matters. But other than that, there was this saying that we had back then that I just ignored, and it was, shut up and listen. And I was somebody who had the mentality of like, well, if I don't ask questions, then how am I going to learn what I need to know? Mm-hmm. And so I would always be asking questions, and they'd be like, Kharn, you need to just shut up and do what you're told. And for some reason, I took offense to that, but it really was a lesson in itself, and I would have learned a lot more if I had just done that instead of trying to pry about things that probably either, were unconsequential, or I would have learned down the road or through another lesson, or would have found out about them when I needed to.
Right.
So listening more. And that's something that I really learned in my theater training, was listening, because because when you're in a scene, you're acting when you're not talking. When you're there, when you're listening, you have to actively listen. And I realized through theater, I'm like, I don't actually listen, like, at all.
Yeah.
So I had to reteach myself how to listen, and then it clicked with me. I'm like, oh, this is what they meant back then. So if I could tell myself one thing back then, go back in time, I would give that explanation to myself and be like, look, really do listen to what you're being told, and stop, being so overly curious, I guess, about things, and it'll come.
On the way out here, I got one last one. This one's mostly for me. What's your favorite anime?
Favorite anime? Okay.
I figured that was coming.
Yeah. So my favorite anime always has been and always probably will be One Piece.
That's a great choice.
So I started watching it when it first came out, and it was actually the 4Kids dub, which was terrible.
Yeah.
But I just was obsessed with the concept of it. I'm like, pirates usually isn't anime usually ninjas, and then I got into it, and I'm like, this has got a lot of, different concepts, like with how they get their powers and all this, and just the animation itself was different. And then finally Funimation bought the rights and actually did it right. And, the 4Kids was kind of like,
what a dark time for
for
anime.
Just thrown in the trash. But that was a big testament to it. It's like I even liked the 4Kids version because the story is just so good. But yeah, I would say one piece, definitely.
Great answer. Do you want to plug your social media real quick?
Yeah, if anybody wants to follow me, you can follow me at Instagram. That's my primary account. It's going to be at thekharnalexander.com. Kharn is spelled Kharn.
Thank you so much, Kharn, for sitting down with us today.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Kharn Alexander, everybody.